Today's episode plunges us into a deeply disturbing camping story, a tale where the supposed safety of the wilderness is brutally shattered by a hidden evil. We are going to explore a community built on trust, the Appalachian Trail, and how that trust was weaponized by a predator operating under a benign facade. This is a story about survival, coincidence, and a killer who returned to his sacred hunting ground. It was the afternoon of May 6, 2008. 54-year-old Ricky Williams stood on the bank of Dismal Creek in Western Virginia, casting his line. Despite the creek's name, the spot was a beautiful, secluded retreat atop a mountain on the Appalachian Trail. Ricky had been camping in the woods for several weeks with his dog, and their food supply was critically low. No fish were biting, and hunger was setting in. Ricky was frail, having grown visibly thinner from the lack of food. He was highly aware of the unwritten code of the Appalachian Trail. If you encounter another hiker, you are obligated to help them if they are in need. Secretly, Ricky hoped a fellow hiker would appear, see his condition, and offer food. After another hour of fruitless fishing, Ricky's dog suddenly began to whine and shift restlessly, sensing danger. Simultaneously, Ricky heard a male voice and movement in the woods behind him. Relief mixed with apprehension. The Appalachian Trail was generally safe, but there had been several murders over the years. Ricky was chillingly close to one notorious crime scene where, in 1981, a well-known killer had stabbed and shot two hikers. Frail and weak, Ricky was acutely aware of his vulnerability. A man in his early 30s stepped out from the tree line. After a moment of silence, the man grinned warmly and introduced himself as Scott Johnston. He told Ricky he was camping nearby with a friend and was also fishing. Scott immediately offered aid, pulling out energy bars, a bag of chips, and fresh bait from his bag. Scott and Ricky spent the next 2 hours fishing, and luck finally turned for the better. As the sun began to set, Scott extended an invitation. "Join my friend and me at our campsite for dinner." For Ricky, who desperately needed a meal, it was a lifeline. He readily accepted. As they walked back into the forest, Scott's fishing pole snagged on a low-hanging branch. He struggled to free it and told Ricky, "Go on ahead, straight up the hill. You can't miss it." Ricky proceeded alone up the hill. When he walked into the campsite clearing, the first thing he noticed was an enormous man, easily twice Scott's size, hunched over the campfire. This man, presumably Scott's friend, heard Ricky enter the clearing and spun around. The huge man, whose name was Shawn, grabbed a club, a piece of wood, and glared menacingly at the stranger. A nervous Ricky quickly put his hands up. "I'm sorry. Scott sent me up here." Just then, Scott emerged from the tree line, patted Ricky on the back, and said, "You've already met my friend, Shawn." Shawn lowered the club, but his hostile expression remained. Ricky felt intensely uncomfortable. Shawn clearly did not want him there. But Scott insisted, urging Ricky to sit down by the fire. As Ricky sat uncomfortably beside the massive, silent Shawn, Scott handed the caught fish over to Shawn to clean. Scott then walked to his truck parked nearby, turned on the radio, and blasted loud country music. Ricky winced. The noise felt disrespectful in the quiet wilderness, confirming his feeling that there was something off about these two pushy, aggressive men. Yet hunger kept him seated. Scott and Shawn pulled out their knives and began deboning the fish. When Ricky meekly offered to help, they waved him off. "Don't worry. We got this." Ricky could only watch nervously as the firelight flashed off their blades. Once the fish was cooking, the atmosphere seemed to ease slightly. Ricky, trying to calm his nerves, began to make small talk. He spoke of his profound love for the Appalachian Trail, how he spent weeks out there, and how being in nature felt like a religious experience. He even admitted to meditating, praying, and doing ritualistic chanting to be in tune with Mother Nature. As he spoke, he noticed that while Scott and Shawn seemed to be listening, they also regarded him with an expression of subtle judgment, as if they thought he was completely odd. Feeling suddenly embarrassed, Ricky fell silent. Around 8 p.m., the fish was done. The three men ate quickly and in silence. It was now pitch black, and Ricky was desperate to leave the uneasy scene. After thanking them, he grabbed his dog and walked into the woods toward his own campsite. After walking only about 10 or 15 feet away from the campfire, two things happened simultaneously. First, Ricky suddenly stopped and turned back toward the campsite. Second, a loud, enormous bang, like a small explosion, echoed through the forest. At the campsite, Scott and Shawn immediately looked at each other in absolute shock and terror. Then Shawn reached up and touched his face. His hand came away covered in red. The loud explosion was the sound of Ricky shooting his gun at Shawn. As Ricky charged into the campsite, continuing to shoot, a wounded Shawn stumbled and fell to the ground. Scott, still unhurt, immediately turned and sprinted away into the woods. Ricky turned his attention to Scott and shot him, hitting him in the neck and back. Astonishingly, Scott kept running and disappeared into the dense foliage. Ricky then turned back to the prone Shawn and casually fired his gun again, hitting Shawn in the chest. The second shot triggered an extreme adrenaline rush in Shawn. He leaped to his feet, sprinted to his Jeep, started it, and sped away. As Shawn navigated the winding road away from the campsite, he spotted his gravely wounded friend, Scott, tumbling out of the woods and onto the road. A severely injured Shawn stopped the Jeep long enough for Scott to climb inside. They sped away, desperately heading for the nearest help, the isolated house where two women lived. Scott, drenched in blood from his neck and back wounds, was the one who collapsed on the porch of the women's house. Muttering a plea for help and mentioning Dismal Creek before collapsing, Shawn was still in the Jeep, too weak to move. Police and ambulances arrived swiftly. Simultaneously, other police units were speeding toward Dismal Creek to investigate the bloody report. As they drove, a truck came bombing down the mountain road directly toward them. The driver briefly attempted to brake, but then deliberately slammed the accelerator, veering into an embankment, crashing, and flipping several times. Police approached the wrecked truck, guns drawn. The lone occupant, the driver, was still alive. Police were highly suspicious. They were heading to Dismal Creek due to a bloody assault, and this driver was speeding away from it before crashing intentionally. An officer was dispatched to escort the injured driver to the hospital. Police continued their ascent to Dismal Creek. Near the site of the shooting, they found a second, more isolated campsite. It contained a simple tent and a campfire. Inside the tent, police found a shocking collection: 30 knives, a police scanner tuned to local frequencies, piles of used clothing, eyeglasses, and 8 pairs of women's underwear. There was also a map of the Appalachian Trail with several circled locations, including Dismal Creek. A cassette tape inside a radio played a creepy recording of a man howling and chanting, likely a bizarre ritual or meditation. But the most crucial piece of evidence was a single piece of paper, a birth certificate. The name on the certificate was Randall Lee Smith. Ricky Williams was not his real name. He was the infamous Randall Lee Smith, the same man who had committed the double homicide on the Appalachian Trail back in 1981, less than 2 miles from Dismal Creek. Smith had been paroled in 1996 and had eventually returned to his sacred place, the Appalachian Trail, where he viewed himself as a custodian and a predator. Smith had survived the crash and was identified at the hospital. 4 days later, he died in custody from a blood clot caused by the crash. The motive remains unknown. Shawn and Scott, who both survived the horrifying attack, testified that they had only wanted to help the frail, older man, never imagining that the code of the trail would be used against them by a calculating predator. The bizarre items found in Smith's tent, clothes, underwear, were never conclusively linked to any missing persons, leaving the true extent of his crimes a disturbing mystery.